what does it mean when we say that OpenAI or ChatGPT or large language models are coming for our jobs? Can they do our jobs? Like, which jobs can they do? Well, OpenAI took a step closer toward this. And here's the thing, guys, this is very much dipping a toe in the water, because there's something terrifying when you start to see benchmarks about how large language models can actually compete with humans in specific roles. But this is what enterprises are paying for, right? This is why they are spending so many billions on these kinds of technologies. And so essentially, OpenAI just ran this evaluation. I think it was called the GDP Val benchmark. And it was trying to compare how experienced professionals rate AI generated work against peer outputs. And this is in fields, it's in finance, healthcare, manufacturing, stuff like that. And so all these models, OpenAI, Anthropic, all this kind of stuff, they're constantly trying to test this. So Jaeden, you and I were going deep on this a little bit, but like I saw that you had done a tremendous amount on this. Can just share with the audience a little bit about like what was this and what makes it so interesting? Because to me, I think this is, in a way, this could be like everything.
Yeah, I think so. Right off the bat, the thing that is like the most crazy about all of this to me is the fact that we're basically putting benchmarks and evaluations on specific job functions. And it gives companies a really good indicator of how fast the AI models are approaching. I don't want to say replacing, but basically doing the work or doing work in a specific industry or job function. And maybe that's like an employee using ChatGPT. Also, though, the pessimistic part of you has to think with agent technology, like at some point, even if people are using these to do things, at some point, the agent technology could replace the people if the technology is good enough at the task. So anyways, that's the pessimistic view. But I think, not really pessimistic view, actually, because maybe that person then just goes to managing a bunch of agents that do it. So the way we work will change, but I think the work still has to be done, and you still want a human architecting and managing everything. Otherwise, like I know of no companies that are 100% run by AI that are anything remotely close to successful.
No.
So you need a person and a vision. But I think it's really interesting that this is kind of the place where we're getting to. And it reminds me almost of when GPT-4 first came out. They were like, oh my gosh, we had like GPT-4 take like the bar exam, or like, and it was like, it's just as smart as a lawyer. And they had like kind of some of these things. Now, is it just as smart as a lawyer? Like, no, there's like a bunch of different things that it wasn't good at. And the models are getting better and better. I think we're getting better with our evaluations at getting a more close understanding of how these models can actually be used in enterprise, how they can actually be applied. Obviously, that's what we talk about a lot on the show. But the thing that I think is quite interesting here is we're going beyond just like, I don't know, like a standardized test and basically running how good it was on a standardized test to how good it is at doing like broad tasks inside. And I think there's a really big difference that anyone will tell you between like book smarts and street smarts. And I think this is a first step at measuring quote unquote street smarts, right? Like not just, okay, you took a bar exam and you answer the questions right, but it's like, given this case and given this issue and given this problem today, do the research and put together the legal defense for XYZ. Like it's actually doing the task, and that's what we're measuring right now. And so I think it's interesting to see the models get better at the actual tasks now.
Yeah. And the word there is critical, right? Tasks, because what we say a lot on this show and elsewhere is, large language models are great at taking tasks. They're not really great at taking jobs yet. Yeah. Right. And that's actually sort of critical, because a job is not one big monolithic task. And what I sometimes argue in the case of legal and things like that is, if your job is really just made up of one or two tasks, then yeah, fundamentally you're a little more at risk, right? This is why customer service is more at risk, because their task and their job is kind of one and the same, right? You answer calls and then you direct them to the right kind of information and you answer their queries. That's what generative AI does unbelievably well. Same with, I would say, paralegals, and I'm not trying to kind of put that into one giant bucket, but if, let's say, you had a job where your main tasks were writing and researching and summarizing reports, generative AI does that really well. And I think that in this article, and I was looking at the TechCrunch article that you and I had been reading on this, it actually points that out, I think, in a really meaningful way. So first of all, one thing that I thought was really funny is that OpenAI tested, and by the way, this is the second time that OpenAI and Anthropic have, I don't know about teaming up, I'm not sure that's the right word, but they've like, I think, didn't they like red team each other's, stuff or something like that? It was kind of cool, right? So, well, let me just say, first of all, that it was ranked for GPT-5 high. That's like the kind of like the super version, right? It says
Which
the AI
we
model
don't
was
have
ranked.
access to. It's like they
No,
give it a
come
whole
on.
bunch of extra compute, and it can spend $1,000 on a query. So like,
Jaden, do we
okay,
need to?
whatever.
Do we need? It's always like you have 10 PhDs in your pocket. I'm like, what do I need 10 I don't need one PhD in my pocket. I don't need anything. Like I need my iPhone in my pocket. So it says this souped up thing. The company says the AI model was ranked as better than on par with industry experts 40.6%. So about 40% of the time, right? But to
Mm.
Jaden's point, this is a model that could spend like $1,000 on a query. This is super computational. That's number one. But then the next paragraph, Jaden, I love, says OpenAI also tested Anthropic's Claude Opus model, which was ranked as better in 49%. OpenAI says that it believes Claude scored so high because its tendency to make pleasing graphics rather than just sheer performance. This is the quote of 2025. Yeah, sure. They're just making they're like this $1 trillion company, not exactly, but they're like $800 billion or something. Like all they do is make pleasing graphics. I'm like, oh my gosh, like way to just like sort of like just punch down. But
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, point being, it's
Way
the
to
idea.
take like a
Yeah,
10
go ahead.
a 10% lead from your main competitor and be like, "Is because they make nice graphics." Like, really? Well, why don't you
Fancy
try that?
graphics. They're just
Yeah.
kissing up to the user.
Yeah.
But the other thing that they say on this is that it does point out that and this is the other part of the TechCrunch article. This is why it's such a great article. It's worth noting. It says that most working professionals do a lot more than submit research reports to their boss, which is all this thing did. So, Jaden, just on that front, when you think about the economic impact of this, and I know you and I talk about this a lot, like what is this going to do to jobs? Will it take jobs? Will it take tasks? In essence, like, yes, it can do one task really well, but as you said very, very well, without quality control, I mean, as we remember, Claude and Anthropic, to their credit, released this whole thing where they made like a vending machine, like a little store, that just sort of like went off the rails a little bit. And
Mhm.
that's now. So I guess when you think about this, what's the so what behind all this? Because right now it's really, really interesting, but is it meaningful in terms of like how people should be thinking about their jobs right now?
I think that this is really useful for some surprising players. One of the things that I think this evaluation is really useful for is software companies that are
Hmm.
building tools. So if I'm building a tool for paralegals or for healthcare or for investment bankers, right? Like there's all these different software companies. I would be paying very close attention to this GDP val and basically determining, okay, it looks like Claude is ranking way higher for this one industry. That's the model I'm using for this industry. Or Gemini is, crushing in a certain area. I'm going to use that. Now they have like the average, and Claude is best on average, I think, with everything, but they break it down by different industries. And I mean, I'm sure you guys kind of understand how this works, but I'll read you a quote on how they're actually doing these so you have an understanding. For this first version that they did, they just asked experienced professionals to compare AI generated reports. This is how a lot of these evaluation things are, right? They'll give you two, one which was made by a professional and then a report that was made by the AI. So in one example they asked investment bankers to create a competitor landscape for the last mile delivery industry and compare them to AI generated reports. Then OpenAI averages an AI model's win rate against the humans. And they did this against 44 different occupations as well. So, I mean, this example is investment bankers, but they took 44 different occupations. They gave them tasks like this. Then they had real people say which one they liked better, and that's how they basically determined. I wonder if there's bias if people could tell that something was AI generated or wasn't AI generated with like the M dashes, and they intentionally chose the human
Right,
one.
right.
So like,
Yeah.
I mean, there could be some interesting biases here, but I think basically once you say that Claude for 49% of tasks was on par or better, I mean, that's pretty insane. OpenAI looks like they got 10% more to go. One of my biggest takeaways with all of this, though, is honestly, I feel like this reads like an ad for Claude. I'm surprised they even released the numbers. Getting beat by 10%. That's like,
I know.
that's really big, especially when you look at the fact that they were running this on Claude. They weren't running this on Claude High. This is a
Right.
standard, regular
4
person's
point,
version
what
of
was it?
Claude.
4.1. It was 4.1 or something like this? What did they run it on?
Yes. And like if you go to the 40 or sorry, the 30 high model, which is like again, that's their high model, so that's annoying because we don't even have access to that. But if you go to their 30 high model, it's 34%. So their 30 regular model, I'm going to say it's 20, it's probably like with Grok or Gemini, like let's say 24%. So we're going 24% to 49% with Claude. Guys, this, if you have not tried Claude, I feel like this is your moment to give it a serious
Seriously.
try.
I don't even understand when people don't. I hear, one of my favorite podcasters out there who I won't name, he knows I love him. but he talks about like he doesn't really use Anthropic. I'm like, man, you're a writer. Why are you not using this? It just, but it's same thing. Like I get it. There's certain tools that I don't use. Everybody's like, why are you not using this? I mean, you talk about Grok. I don't use Grok all the time, but I just
Mhm.
ran into somebody last night who's like, all I use is Grok for financial analysis. I'm like, so I get that. But Jaeden, by the way, as we're griping here, because I love our gripe sessions, can I also just say that I think OpenAI really gets something wrong here, really profoundly, which is that they were sort of complaining that Claude, it scores 10% higher because they have just like nicer graphics and not sheer
Mhm.
performance. Can I just say, like, that is spoken like a true nerd? Like, I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
It's sort of like people getting angry that, people who run for office or presidents aren't that smart. It's like, oh, I could run circles. I'm like, yeah, but it's not just about sheer performance. Life is not just about sheer performance. Right? I
Mhm.
mean, like if you interview well, you will get a better job. Like you look at CEOs of companies, they are not the smartest people at that organization ever, ever. Right? They are
And that's
people
not
that
the
can
point,
sell
right?
things.
They need to be surrounded
Yes.
by the smartest people.
Exactly. So when they say it's just, oh, it's based on nice, performance. Sorry, it's not based on nice graphics. Yeah, because that's what helps the client understand the value of this thing. If you just have a nerd give somebody a white paper, like, yeah, that beats in performance. It was a very telling moment for what engineers, and by the way, broad brush here. But
Yeah.
in this particular case, what OpenAI engineers get wrong, which is they think it's about performance. And I get it because that is their life, but it is not what people need. And the biggest thing about this, and what I do a lot around AI adoption, it has nothing to do with how smart the model is. I never teach the latest models when I'm teaching big companies. I always just sort of like say like, look, let's take the dumb model because it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is how you shift your behavior on this and whether
Mhm.
or not you can sort of get your head around what this user interface is and how it's a software that behaves like a human but it doesn't look like a human. That's what's important. It's not the sheer power of the model because we don't need 10 PhDs in our pocket. All right, end of rant, Jaeden. That's it. I'm done.
Fantastic rant. One thing I will add. So we've thoroughly roasted OpenAI, I think, for this. I will give them their flowers here on a big in a big way, I think. And that is in the same way I gave Mark Zuckerberg his flowers when he went on stage and demoed his glasses and they
Yeah,
glitched and
man.
crashed. I actually think this is a really good moment. So basically, the quote that they gave to TechCrunch, they said, because the model is getting good at some of these things, people in those jobs can now use the model increasingly as capabilities get better to offload some of their work and do potentially higher value things. Okay, this is the reason why they're releasing this evaluation metric is because they want people to basically be able to look at the AI models to see how well they're doing at different tasks and to say, okay, it literally is better at these tasks than a human. I'm just going to use the model instead. Like you can confidently show your boss, you can show someone at work, you can, show yourself, okay, the model is better at this. If OpenAI came out with this new GDP val metric, and this is the new valuation, and they were number one for everything, and maybe they gamed it so they're like a fraction of a point ahead, like we've seen other metrics, I don't think many people would trust it. And so when
Right.
you come up with a new like this is one of the biggest critiques that these AI model companies get is that when they're doing these model evaluations, it feels like they're gaming them and they're exposed that maybe they only picked half the question responses so they would look like it was performing higher. Like it feels like they do shady things. And so I'm going to give OpenAI some flowers and say I'm really happy they came out with their first version of this evaluation where they showed a competitor way ahead of them because now I trust GDP val. I'm like, okay, like they're not gaming this thing, right? If you own the model and you own the evaluation metric, yes, you could just very easily game it and make it so you're number one at everything and I won't trust it. So that's the one thing I think that they did do well here. I'll give them their flowers is that they came out with a metric that didn't show them as number one. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you got anything out of this episode and you want to be able to use different AI tools to grow and scale your career, your businesses, the number one thing I would recommend is to go try Conor's AI mindset course. He has a phenomenal course that has been used by tens of thousands of employees of people basically. And at this point, I think some companies, they'll have like 10,000 employees and they will go get a license for every single person in the organization to use this thing because they can see just how transformative it is on their organization, and they see insane ROI. I mean, I can't share the numbers, but it's pretty impressive to look at. Basically, like they put an ROI on this course inside their organization. Like they'll put a serious investment in because they see how much more profitable and productive it makes their company and their employees. So if you're looking to upskill yourself and especially your organization, other people inside your organization with AI, that is the number one thing I would recommend. There's a link in the description to Conor's AI mindset course. It's phenomenal. One of the best things I think you can do to level up in the AI field today. All right, thanks so much everyone for tuning in. We will catch you in the next episode. Leave us a rating and a review. We love you all, and I'll see you next time.